to my mind, it was always the biggest challenge is how can you unleash Bitcoin? How can you sort of learn from what has been built out in the rest of crypto and bring some of that functionality so that you can build layers of decentralization around Bitcoin. Right now, if you just want to hodl Bitcoin, okay, the system is probably perfect for that, but that is not a very useful asset if all you can do is hold it, right? The amount of freedom, the amount of self sovereignty that provides to a person is actually quite limited.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel today. I'm here with Yago, which is contributor for Bitcoin OS. How you doing today, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, likewise. I'm super excited about this. We were discussing it off camera. We're going to talk about two things I love, Cardano and Bitcoin. But before we do so, do you mind to give us an intro and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I was born in South Africa during apartheid. My family, some of them were members of the ANC, which was Mandela's anti-apartheid movement. Because of that, they were defined as terrorists. They had to flee South Africa. That meant that I ended up, when I was a little kid, sort of smuggling gold in the form of Krugerrands out of South Africa to get money to my family. And so, my early experiences were fighting for freedom, human rights, and the importance of financial freedom and capital controls and how this all works. Since then, I've been sort of continued to be politically and socially active. I think, that's a big thing that runs in my family. And I became, at the same time, I think I've also always been extremely libertarian and extremely technology focused. I think that technology ultimately is really the only thing which has demonstrably improved lives. Like we've got like all kinds of institutions and social things, and we try all kinds of games and culture, but ultimately it seems that technology is what makes the difference. And so I've always been a bit of an accelerationist. And uh, when I was in university, I was studying philosophy and history, but also neuroscience, and I began working on neural networks and sort of AI. And that is actually what brought me to Bitcoin because I was reading papers in network science. In 2011, I came across the Satoshi white paper and it hit me like a brick in the face. Completely screwed up all of my life plans because I was reading this document and it was a document that said, okay, look, we can have property rights on the internet. We can use the internet to create a free market. We can have unstoppable money, and we can create a world in which everyone has access to the economy. Everyone can participate. It can be incorruptible, and no 9-year-old boy ever needs to smuggle gold again.
Wow, what a story. Thank you so much for sharing it. When I stumbled across Satoshi's White, which by the way, 9 pages into a PDF, so you can digest it quite quickly. It also changed my perspective on a couple of different things. And I mean, how did you came across Cardano? Like, was a consequence of Bitcoin, like finding the Satoshi paper, then led you into the broader blockchain?
No, I've always been very focused on Bitcoin because my overall feeling is that Bitcoin is unique. It is the only pure play ledger, right? Other blockchains have sought to add additional functionality and sort of build heavier chains, I would call them. But Bitcoin remains this unchanging pure play ledger. And what makes that so powerful is the fact that it is minimalistic. It is a minimal set of rules, which I think is really important because if you want something to be extremely global and basically accepted by everyone, it needs to be a set of rules which can be as minimal as possible. And then on top of that, you can add additional rule sets. And also, it makes it permanent, right? We've got all kinds of systems like Ethereum. They behave like software. They change all the time. They have breaking changes. They get bigger and bigger. They bloat. But Bitcoin remains permanent. It's permaware. It's a totally new thing. It's not hardware. It's not software. And therefore, it is this solid foundation upon which you can build a new financial system, upon which you can build new institutions, upon which I think you can build a new world. So I've always been curious about what happens in the crypto space. I think it's really important to have an open mind. I think it makes Bitcoiners dumber when they just say everything else is Bitcoin. And I think that has been one of the worst cultural things that I've seen happen in Bitcoin. Not just because it makes people dumber and more closed-minded, but also because it pushes people away. And what we want to do is bring people together. So, to my mind, it was always the biggest challenge is how can you unleash Bitcoin? How can you sort of learn from what has been built out in the rest of crypto and bring some of that functionality so that you can build layers of decentralization around Bitcoin? Right now, if you just want to hodl Bitcoin, okay, the system is uh, probably perfect for that. But that is not a very useful asset if all you can do is hold it, right? The amount of freedom, the amount of self sovereignty that provides to a person is actually quite limited. So I've been working to try and figure out how we can build systems on Bitcoin that can allow for more use cases, more tokens on Bitcoin using the world's best ledger, and perhaps for me personally, most importantly, is DeFi, right? Because I want to be able to utilize my Bitcoin without ever having to sell it and start to see some of the value in the Bitcoin that I've been holding for 13 years. And so around 4 years ago, I became convinced that rollups were going to be the future because that is a way that you can scale in layers with cryptographic assumptions and make very few trade-offs as you achieve greater degrees of functionality and greater degrees of scale. And that led me to start looking into ZK proofs. And so for the last 4 years, I and a bunch of other people, we've been looking to figure out, can we build rollups? Can we verify ZK proofs on Bitcoin? We helped fund a bunch of developers. And then late last year, a really interesting paper was published by Robin Linus called BitVM. And while we didn't think that BitVM, as it was described in the paper, seemed practical, based on everything else that we had been working on, we thought we saw a path potentially forward to bringing ZK to Bitcoin. And then, by January of this year, we had put together a team. In April, we published a paper demonstrating that we believed it was possible. And then in July, for the first time, we demonstrated ZK on Bitcoin without making any changes to Bitcoin mainnet. And that was a big change, right? That happened in block 853.626, and basically I say, Bitcoin sort of had its eyes closed to the world for 853,252 blocks or 255 blocks, and then in that 853.626, it suddenly got eyes and a brain in which it could interpret things that were happening outside of Bitcoin and use them to execute activity on Bitcoin. And we weren't the only people who thought this was a big deal. And so a lot of different projects, developers, just people in general were reaching out to us. And one of those projects was Cardano. And that made me look at Cardano again because I really hadn't looked at Cardano for a long time. And I was actually pretty impressed that Cardano, not only had they built out the world's largest smart contract platform using UTXOs, and as a result, they had maybe the community of developers who understood how to work with UTXOs better than, larger than anywhere else or any other community, but also they have a very long time horizon. They are building Cardano also to look much less like software and much more like firmware. And so as we began looking into this and discussing with more people within the Cardano community, it became more and more apparent that Cardano in particular could be a really good computation programmability platform that could integrate with Bitcoin OS and as a result provide programmability to Bitcoin.
I love this. And thank you so much. So many good things to unpack here. So first of all, I couldn't agree more with you. I feel like the crypto space is being compartmentalized. I agree with the saying Bitcoin is not crypto. I buy into it. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge that crypto exists. So I don't see a place where there is only going to be Bitcoin. There is going to be space for many other chains to do many other things. So seeing people like you coming out and being creative and building on top of other stuff, it's a joy. And there is so many projects out there, and I don't even think most are competing one another. I don't think Ethereum is competing to Solana or Cardano is competing with Ethereum. They have different roles, different plays, and every cycle there's going to be, this cycle Solana is the Ethereum killer, and now Sui is going to kill Solana. I don't think anything is going to kill anything. I think it's going to be an ecosystem where there's going to be a bunch of technologies doing certain different things, and people like yourself are going to coming out into a free market and say, hey, I have an idea, I'm building a product, is there a market for this? Yes, let's go. Because I also believe that Bitcoin is the base money, but we need layers on top. I like the analogy of the frog into a tunnel, right? You only see through a tunnel, whether if you smash the tunnel, you see the entire universe. So bottom of my heart, thank you for doing this, because I think the overall space needs to see more people like you.
Well, I think that one of the challenges is that most people, one of the reasons that most people don't believe in free markets, or most people are sort of like tend towards some kind of socialism or some kind of authoritarianism. One of the main reasons is that intuitively people don't think of the world as an expanding pie. They think of it as a fixed pie, because pretty much everything in the human experience is fixed, right? It's not like if I eat from a cake and you eat from a cake, the cake grows, right? And so the more I eat from the cake, the less you're going to have from the cake. And people think about the economy in the same way. The more someone is buying Bitcoin, that must mean the less someone is buying ADA or ETH. But actually, economies are these amazing things that the more you eat from them, the bigger they grow. And so I question to a degree if Bitcoin would be as significant as it is today if all of these other systems hadn't arisen. Because a huge number of people have been onboarded through Ethereum, and a huge number of people have been onboarded through meme coins, and a great deal of hope and activity and narratives, some of them true and some of them not, but have brought people in ways that would have been difficult if it was only Bitcoin, especially over the last 10 years, where Bitcoin has kind of been in the after effects of a civil war that it had with itself. So Bitcoin in many ways for many years was fudding itself. And so what we're doing with Bitcoin OS is we are building a system that isn't a blockchain. It sits between blockchains. It sits in this empty negative space between blockchains. And it allows Bitcoin to become a hub which integrates all of the rest of crypto and gives Bitcoiners choice. And I think also massively empowers other crypto systems to compete with each other to better serve, right? But BTC, Bitcoin users, new assets in Bitcoin would act as a programmable layer to Bitcoin. And so there's a really big opportunity now, which wasn't available before, for the crypto industry as a whole to become less tribal, not less competitive. Competitive is good, but less tribal, because if you have free trade between these different sort of sovereign zones of assets, which is in many ways what a blockchain is, it's like free trade in the world. It grows the economy very, very substantially. One of the things that has happened to me today, actually, is I woke up and there was a huge amount of FUD from the Cardano community about Bitcoin OS having a token. Because I think a lot of people intuitively think, well, if Bitcoin OS is going to have a token, well, then that must mean that they're eating part of our pie. I'm hoping that, I know it's an uphill battle because it's very unintuitive, and but I'm hoping that one of the benefits of crypto is that it will make people more savvy, more economically minded, right? Thinking in terms of free markets, thinking in terms of economics, and see that, wait, if Bitcoin OS allows Cardano to provide programmability to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin to provide assets, a massive asset base to Cardano, both of them can grow. And even if that means that Bitcoin OS grows as well, the more the boss token sort of gains value, actually might mean that ATA and BTC gain more and more value as well. So there's always sort of a tension between value creation and value capture. But most things that we can think of, everything from Microsoft to Tesla, from McDonald's to I don't know, Nike, right? They have a component of value capture, but it's usually like 2 or 3% of the value that they're actually creating.
Can you give me an example on how these basically 3 ecosystems are going to work. You said you are into negative space, which means you're going to connect Bitcoin and Cardano with a potential token that you just now mentioned. So can you give me an example on how these 3 different blocks are going to talk to each other?
Let's say I want to have a I want to have a stable coin on Bitcoin. Okay. So I need to be able to do quite a lot of things. I need to be able to issue a new token on Bitcoin. I need to be able to issue that new token on Bitcoin, which today, like you can issue new tokens on Bitcoin, like runes and BRC20s, but they're not programmable. So pretty much everything I'm going to describe right now until Bitcoin OS was impossible. So I need to be able to issue a new token. I need that token to be issued by a smart contract, because otherwise the stablecoin would be centralized, not really backed by Bitcoin. I need the amount of tokens to be issued programmatically based on how much Bitcoin there is. I need to be able to lock up that Bitcoin. And so all of that activity can happen on Bitcoin. But for that activity to happen on Bitcoin, there needs to be smart contracts, which, are pretty, that you couldn't put these smart contracts on Bitcoin, not just because you don't have the scripting language to do it, but just the amount of data that they would consume would make it prohibitively expensive. Bitcoin only has 4 megabytes of data available every 10 minutes. It's the most scarce data, the most scarce digital resource in the world. Okay, so it's 2025. Bus is integrated now with Bitcoin and Cardano. They, as a result, are integrated together. And you, Maurizio, you go and you create this smart contract, but you write it on Cardano. And because you're writing it on Cardano, because you're writing it on a UTXO system, it's actually really easy for it to map its addresses and all of its activity to Bitcoin. And what that smart contract says is, if someone deposits into a UTXO on Bitcoin, we will detect that. We will calculate how much BTC value was deposited, and we will share back the data required to mint the appropriate amount of stablecoins. And so this communication is done provably, right, through ZK proofs, right? So we can generate a ZK proof of what is happening on Bitcoin. We can pass that ZK proof to Cardano. The smart contract calculates what needs to be calculated, performs the compute. That generates a new ZK proof, which gets sent over to Bitcoin, which gets validated, verified, and executed on Bitcoin, and the new stablecoin is issued. And now you have a stablecoin that exists on Bitcoin. You don't have to do this in Cardano, but Cardano sort of has so many of the tools already available that Cardano becomes one of, the most obvious places that you would go. It becomes an extremely attractive place to do this.
Makes sense, and thank you for explaining it so well. I think you touch on the 4 megabyte space. I mean, we've seen throughout history a lot of Bitcoin forks because people have different opinions when it comes to where Bitcoin has to go next. And I remember when inscription came in and people freaked out, they are using the space on Bitcoin, the fees are going up and blah, blah, blah. But like you said, I like the free market. So if people are minting runes and they are doing inscription, it's because there is a willing for people to use them. So who am I to block it, right? Let the market be. Like I said in the beginning, having this base where we all agree collectively there is money is one thing, but we have to build on top to be able to, classify this thing, this asset as is it a currency? Is it a store of value? Like, can we have decentralized finance built on top of it? Bitcoin doesn't have smart contract. That's why Ethereum was born, because they wanted to solve some of the problems, but I think they went on a completely different version. So having some sort of I don't know if I can call it bridge, maybe it's not the right way, but having some sort of a connector in between a decentralized ecosystem such as Cardano and Bitcoin, I think it's phenomenal because it's going to allow all the liquidity into Bitcoin to flow and vice versa, into one into another.
I think it really changes so much about how we think about everything we're doing in the crypto space. I think it means that we can think completely differently about Bitcoin, right? Not only about what we can do with BTC, which now becomes effectively unlimited, but also what we can do with Bitcoin's ledger, right? Why should BTC be the only asset on the world's best ledger? I sometimes say that the analogy is like the special theory of relativity and the general theory of relativity, right? The special theory of Bitcoin is just BTC. The general theory of Bitcoin is all property rights. And so, but it also changes how we think about how we should be building in the crypto space. I think we're very, very lucky that we have one system that is credibly neutral that no one really competes with. Ethereum used to think it competes with Bitcoin, but I think it's now obvious that it doesn't. Uh, and so it can act as this very, very simple, unchanging central hub for all of crypto. It already does implicitly, because when Bitcoin goes up, everything goes up. When Bitcoin goes down, everything goes down, right? Bitcoin provides a sort of like regulatory nuclear umbrella, even if you start something which is not so decentralized, which only has a few validators. No one really prosecutes you because Bitcoin has sort of paved the way. And so, in so many ways, everything we do is attached to Bitcoin, not to mention the fact that it is like the mother chain. And now everything can reconnect through this mother chain. And so it changes how we even think about the general structure of crypto, which is, I think that there's so much efficiency to be gained by having more of a hub and spoke model rather than a system with all of these different systems. They're completely different. You have a million different bridges, many of them insecure. You know, just at the beginning, just in the first, I think, 6 months of this year, there was $1.6 billion stolen from bridges. So we have now an opportunity to create a truly more secure, more stable, more globally accepted by traditional and institutional players as well, form of crypto, which can get us out of the space which we are in now, which is basically just casino speculation, and into the entire world of finance, pensions, mortgages, real world assets, bonds, government strategic reserves, right? The reality is that none of those things are going to be built on software. They need to be built on firmware. And Bitcoin offers its nuclear umbrella now to everyone in the form of firmware.
All this capital blocked into different kind of warehouses, and they don't talk one another. So I think whoever is going to come up with some interoperability problem solving is going to win the entire market. Seeing you coming in and connecting two of my favorite things, which are Cardano and Bitcoin, is actually fascinating. I mean, I flicked through the white paper, which is amazing. Do you have a roadmap? I mean, how you're going to tackle it? Because this is like a monster. So are you going to go out in steps? What's the next thing?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in building an iteration, and also, we're in early days now, but we're making really great progress. So we've managed to verify ZK on Bitcoin. We've managed to publish that as open source. We're actually releasing a new version of that very, very soon, which is more powerful, makes it easier for devs to work with. We're very soon going to be able to demonstrate for the first time bridging, trustlessly bridging between Bitcoin and a rollup. Soon after that, we would like to be able to demonstrate that you can also bridge to things which aren't rollups to Bitcoin. By the time we expect that by around March, we will have the first version of a fully fleshed out operating system, which allows developers to build systems with external compute on Cardano or on a EVM chain or on a DApp, which isn't even on a chain, prove that computation to Bitcoin, and have the ability to manipulate assets on Bitcoin or bridge the assets into their system, which is basically the same thing. It's just two different ways of thinking about the UX. Will also allow for interoperability between these different. So if you're building on Bitcoin OS, right, Bitcoin starts to feel like a single unitary platform, right? The entire ecosystem is part of the same thing, and the whole and all of the different applications and chains can talk to each other seamlessly. So that seamless experience, that is going to be like the hardest part. And you're right, it is a monster. There's just a huge amount of like it's very easy to say, but the amount of work and the amount of sort of different actors that need to be coordinated in order to achieve this is very, very large. But that seamless experience is a big part of what our end goal is.
I bet, yeah. And how is your token is going to come in play? Do you already have a ticker for the token itself you mentioned
So
earlier?
the token will be BOS, BOS, so Bitcoin OS, and the goal of the token is to be able to to bootstrap the actors, and then maintain and incentivize the actors that make the system work. And all of those actors are off-chain actors, right? So it's we're actually focused on sort of where most people have not been looking, and where I think that most of our problems today lie, which is that negative space between chains. We want to dissolve the barriers between chains. And so what we need is we need a whole bunch of actors, provers who can take compute, prove it, write it to Bitcoin, verifiers who can verify that they're doing their job properly, aggregators who can aggregate and sequence transactions across the entire ecosystem and can sort of provide an API so that you can take an action that is occurring on one rollup and sort of embed it into a transaction that is occurring on another chain. So there's a large number of actors that we need to coordinate here. And the boss token allows for those actors to coordinate not on a single chain, which is basically all of our coordination mechanisms have up until now been built around a single chain, and most of them look like consensus systems. Bitcoin OS doesn't have its own consensus mechanism. It relies primarily on Bitcoin's consensus mechanism, and then sort of outsources the other parts of consensus to whatever chain they're occurring on. So even just that action needs to be coordinated. So what does this allow us to do? Well, I'll give you an example. Let's say you wanted to have a smart token, a programmable token, right? And this token is a stable coin, but this stable coin pays you interest. So there are all kinds of ways that you could have a token that pays you interest, right? You could have like one token pays the interest and one token is the stable coin. That's not great because now they're not integrated. Another way you could do it is you can rebase the token, right? So, as the system accrues assets, you have a token which sort of like today you have 100 tokens, tomorrow you have 102 tokens, the day after you have 104 tokens, etc. Well, one of the big problems with rebase tokens is they don't really work cross-chain at all. Because when I'm doing most type of cross-chain activity, what I'm doing is I'm taking the token, I'm putting it into some kind of bridge, which is a bunch of people who are controlling one side of it, and then they will mint another token on the other side, and so they accrue more and more tokens. But here on the other chain, that isn't occurring. So one of the beautiful things that we would like to achieve with Bitcoin OS is this ability to have a token which can provide you interest anywhere it goes, so long as that system is integrated with Bitcoin OS. Because ultimately, it is able to share proofs, ZK proofs between these different systems that prove that you just earned interest. And if it needs a canonical place to look, it can just look to Bitcoin for the canonical state of that token. So that is something we can't even really approach today with crypto, and something that with Bitcoin OS we would be able to have. And at that point, the crypto industry, sort of Web3, whatever you want to call it, starts to actually feel a lot more like the web. Today, if you go to a website, you can click on a hyperlink and you go directly to that website. Or if you open, the Uber app on your phone, the Google Maps is embedded directly into that. Doing that across different chains today is almost impossible. And Bitcoin OS, potentially in partnership with some of these more sophisticated bridge projects, will be able to deliver that kind of experience.
And I agree with you. Like if I think about in terms of wallets, you have Phantom, where Solana is in, but now you can also transfer Bitcoin. But at the same time, if you download Phantom and you have Bitcoin in your wallet, you cannot exchange Bitcoin for Solana yet. I mean, they'll bridge it at some point somehow, same as MetaMask. Now MetaMask, you support Solana. So they're kind of going and find this middle ground. Cardano's gone his own way with his own wallets and his own ecosystem. So I think we need to get everything together. And this BOS token that you mentioned, it's going to be living in both chains, in Bitcoin and Cardano, or in one specifically?
What I would expect is the canonical registry of the asset will exist on Bitcoin, and then you'd probably be able to utilize it in other chains. But the benefit, look, the very first problem that blockchain was invented to solve is the double spend problem. And the double spend problem becomes very, very difficult when you have more than one ledger, right? If you have two ledgers, now this ledger says one thing and the other ledger says something else. And which is the right one, right? And so by having a canonical ledger, you could basically piggyback on the fact that Bitcoin already solves the double spend problem for us. And so I suspect that Bitcoin, the ledger, is going to become the home, the canonical home of the most valuable assets. Maybe meme coins, many of them will stay on Solana, and maybe other coins will exist in different places for other reasons. But when it comes to assets which people expect to hold over many years, or continue to use for many years, or expect like ordinals will be very, very valuable, they will live in Bitcoin.
How are you feeling about the market? Because so far we've been respecting those 4-year cycles, right? And it's going to rhyme. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it should be more or less in the same ballpark number figures, and it should be ending this bull market in October next year if history repeats and or rhyme. Do you also feel we still have another, I don't know, like year-ish more or less before we then see a substantial correction?
My base case is that yes, it will look more or less the same, and actually will continue to look more or less the same probably for a while. So I don't think this is the last cycle. However, we are seeing different kinds of actors with different motivations. We are seeing potentially the creation of national sort of sovereign reserves. We are seeing Saylor just sort of smash buying any dollars he can get his hands onto. And so you could imagine, it wouldn't be far fetched to imagine that this just is on a different scale. We also, I think, had what we've been seeing from one cycle to another are diminishing returns. We may buck that trend now. Like my base case is that Bitcoin was going to somewhere between, I don't know, 180 and 220,000. I would be not super surprised to see Bitcoin go to 500K sometime over the next, I don't know, 12 to 18 months. I don't know. I'm not a trader, and I think that makes my life much more relaxed. I just buy and hold those things that I have conviction in. But my base case is that we're just going to keep seeing the cycles, but they're going to become a little bit more. It's like when you put a piece of paper into a printer. Each time you print it, it becomes a little bit less defined. I think the cycles are going to become slightly less defined with each cycle, right? I think that as Bitcoin becomes programmable, suddenly what you can imagine Bitcoin doing it changes dramatically. And as the crypto ecosystem becomes integrated and the borders between them is reduced, the frictions are reduced, the free market becomes more free, and free markets generate more value more quickly. So we are going to see an economic singularity, right, where Bitcoin goes basically to infinity. Are we one cycle away, or 2 cycles away, or just 8 months away? I don't know.
I think it's just early. I don't think we are ready. I don't know the numbers, but I think 98% of the people, they have no idea what Bitcoin is. They have no idea what crypto is because it's too complicated. Like I said, I have a lot of people I'm sure like you have in your network. They're like, what keys? What's the Trezor? So my Bitcoin is in the USB thing. It's still quite a bit complicated.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of work to do for sure.
We do have a lot of work to do, and I'm going to say something sacrilegious. I think there's always going to be a place for centralized services. A
100%.
lot of people are going to prefer centralized services because, look, I don't think freedom is for everyone, honestly. It's with freedom comes a lot of responsibility. You suddenly, your life is based on your choices. That is a big burden. If you make a mistake, if you get lost in life, if things don't go your way, it's your fault. And for a lot of people, it's comforting to give up freedom in order to have convenience. Now, do I think that's a good thing? Do I identify with those people? No. Do they exist? I think they're the majority. I think we need to be building those systems that allow those who want to be free, to be heroic in their lives, to take on the risks that they want to take, to make the mistakes that they're willing to make, to live with risk. And we also need to allow some people who want to, cushion risk from their lives for whatever reason, because, they're scared, or they're old, or they have children, or, they don't understand. So actual life is much more complicated than, crypto Twitter libertarians, Bitcoiners, or really anyone likes to admit. But I'd like to end on a dangerous note for me, maybe not a dangerous note for all of us. But one thing that I've been thinking about is real estate has sucked so much dynamism, innovation, and value out of the economy because maybe you start a great startup in San Francisco, but all of the wage increase that the people you're paying see goes to just paying higher and higher rents. And so it's the people who own the property already, they're sucking all of the value out of the economy. We call that a renter economy, right? Let's fast forward the world 20 years. You are rich. I'm rich. Everyone listening to this podcast is very, very rich because we bought Bitcoin and we held onto that Bitcoin. We bought some other cryptos, maybe we held onto those. People are going to need Bitcoin. They're going to need these other assets because that will be the economy. And as they work harder and harder, the value of our bags will just keep going up. So are we just going to be the next group of boomers out there? And are we going to be slowly sucking in 20 or 30 years the dynamism out of the economy? And if that does happen, who's going to fix that problem? Will have to be our children or our grandchildren. And so are we screwing them over? Sometimes this is the kind of thing that worries me. And I think that there are ways that we can construct systems. Like, for example, I much prefer proof of work to proof of stake because I think proof of stake is a very explicitly rentier society. But also having a deflationary, like everyone says, oh, you can have an economy with a deflationary currency. Inflation is the worst. Inflation is how they steal from you. And there is truth to that. But there is also the question of when you have a deflationary system, right, where the assets just keep getting more and more valuable as more and more value is created in the system, that tends to dampen dynamism in the system. And that could happen with Bitcoin as well. So I'll just leave you with that as my sort of committing suicide to a Bitcoiner audience last thought.
Thank you so much, Yago. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Please come back and keep me posted on Bitcoin OS because I'm super interested in what you guys are building. And thank you so much for having you. It's been great talking to you today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you on the next one.